Well everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the Samsung Galaxy A21 and see how this particular phone holds up in 2024. Now, the thing I will definitely tell you is, I like these phones a lot. I think Samsung has always made very good phones. I think they look great, and I've always felt like there wasn't really that much to complain about here with a lot of their budget phones that they made. But I will definitely tell you in a lot of different ways, the Samsung Galaxy A21, when it first came out, it was a good phone. I really don't think this is a phone I would recommend any single person to go ahead and buy anymore, and we'll talk about that throughout this whole entire video. But if you do want to pick up some budget Samsung phones I probably would recommend buying this year, links will be down in the description. You can get that from there, and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, starting off with the outside of the Samsung Galaxy A21, on the front of this particular phone, we actually have a 6.5-inch IPS LCD panel on it, and it's an okay panel. It's 720p, and the problem that you're kind of getting in when you're getting one of these older, like even the A21, is that even though it came out in 2020, it's a 4-year-old phone, this phone's panel really isn't that great. And when you are getting this large of an IPS panel, this is a very big display. When you're getting a display that's this big and it's only 720p, it's going to be a very pixelated type of display. And that is something you probably don't want to run into when you're getting a device. There are lots of other things to be complaining about this phone. The fact that this display is already not good is, not the best look for it. But you have to remember, this was a budget phone. This was not supposed to be competing with the Samsung Galaxy S20 of that time, which was the flagship of 2020. This is supposed to be like a budget, like a super budget phone. Like you can walk inside of the Best Buy, ask for the cheapest phone they're selling, and this is going to be one of the options they would give you. Now, it was a hole punch display, which was actually fairly interesting. You were getting a little bit of bezel at the bottom, but I still give credit, for Samsung making a phone like this, but again, it really wasn't that great of a display at that time. You're getting a USB Type-C port on the bottom of this phone, which is very nice. I love having USB-C, and you are getting that type of capability with this type of device as well. Around the sides, it's basically a phone that's primarily built out of plastic. It does kind of have a good heft to it though, for like being a very, very cheap plasticky phone. It does actually look pretty good, and it feels pretty good too, which is actually very, very nice. So I think that's actually a pretty good thing, but again, it's completely built out of plastic in every single way you could kind of imagine. You're also getting a headphone jack on this phone too, which again is kind of nice to have. And you are still getting your SIM card tray inside of this phone too, which again is super nice. And you are getting a micro SD card slot inside of this phone as well. So that in and of itself, having that type of I/O right there is super cool. I love having that type of capability. And this in and of itself gets a thumbs up for me without a doubt here for sure. So you have to kind of give, Samsung a lot of credit here for, again, making these types of devices. And again, I think this one really wasn't like that terrible at that time. Now on the backside, this thing again is like built out of plastic, but it's kind of like this glossy plastic material. You can definitely tell it's built out of plastic, but it kind of has like a really nice, this is like a decent plastic bag for like being a glossy kind of one, which feels really nice. You have this fingerprint sensor on the back of it, and you have this 20 billion camera setup on the back. I have no idea why they do this kind of stuff. It looks very, very funny to me, but I do understand why they're doing it, but definitely I think on the Samsung side, they just do it to make it look like it's a better camera, but it's really not going to be giving you anything. Now this phone is missing out on a lot of crucial things. One, it's missing out on wireless charging, so there's no wireless charging on this, which means there's no reverse wireless charging either, but there's also no IP certification on this phone too. So although it might be a little bit of water resistant and waterproof, it's not going to be waterproof at all. It might be it's not going to be resistant certified like a Samsung Galaxy flagship would be. So another thing to kind of keep in mind there too. Otherwise though, I think there's still a lot to love about this particular device. I love this thing for being as cheap as it was. But like I said, this thing really isn't going to be a phone I would recommend any single person to buy as of this age. So that kind of covers it up there. In terms of the camera, this is also a very interesting thing because it just showcases why it's so important that a phone is more than just the amount of camera sensors or the amount of megapixels within a camera. The Samsung Galaxy A21 has a 16 megapixel wide angle lens in the front, an 8 megapixel ultra wide camera, 2 megapixel macro lens, then a 2 megapixel depth camera lens on the back of this camera, and then a 13 megapixel wide angle lens. Now you would kind of hear those types of sensors and you might be like, okay, it's not that bad, right? Not the case at all. Not only is the camera quality not that great, the problem that you're also running into with the Samsung Galaxy A21 now is that you can only film in 1080p on the front and the back. Now 1080p is not that bad, right? Do not get me wrong. 1080p is still okay, but having the ability to go up to 4K, even 4K at 30, is a bare minimum in this day and age, and you are not getting that on this particular device. which again, in and of itself for me, is probably one of the biggest downsides. Like if I'm going from one device to the other, I'm going to be honest, I wanted to have at least 4K at 60, and this phone is not providing it for me. So that in and of itself is another problem that I kind of have with this particular device. So personally for me, if I'm going through and getting some sort of device, I'm just not a big fan of it. The camera quality really wasn't that great when it first came out, and it still isn't that great. And if you get this phone, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. So just do yourself a favor. Just don't buy this phone. And I'd recommend some other phones later on in this video, but for this one, it just really isn't worth buying in my personal opinion. Now, another big thing with the Samsung Galaxy A21 is with its software. The software experience on the Galaxy A21, I will tell you, really wasn't that great either. From what I know, it stopped at Android 10, so it may have gotten a little bit further too. But this thing, as I mentioned before, I mean, this is kind of the problem and the issue that you're getting when you're running into these types of devices. Like with a device like the Samsung Galaxy A21, you are basically getting a very limited type of software experience, considering this thing has been outdated with software for many years now. And like I said, I would hate for you to go ahead and buy a phone and purchase a device and have it already outdated, or have it already running into issues and problems that you're basically running into. And that is kind of what's going on with the Samsung Galaxy A21. From a software perspective, this phone really isn't worth buying at all. And that's just another thing I recommend avoiding too, is just don't really get this phone, because it's just gonna, like I said, you're just gonna be running into problems from a software perspective too. It just like never ends with this phone. But again, it was a cheaper phone, so I kind of get it. Now, performance wise, this phone has that MediaTek MT6765 Helio P35 chipset inside, longest name I've ever heard, with 3GB of RAM. Now, the RAM itself actually isn't that terrible. Again, having 3GB of RAM inside of like a budget kind of low powered phone isn't really that bad. But it's a problem when you're starting to run out of software updates, when you're kind of already having like a, kind of average display and all these other things. It just kind of adds to the picture of it not really being that great of a device. Now, you can do very basic stuff with this particular phone, but if you do plan on going up and taking it up a notch and doing anything insane at all, this is definitely not going to be that great of an experience at all either. Like I said, I would hate for you to go ahead and purchase this phone and have it already like kind of giving you issues and problems. And that is kind of what ends up happening when you end up purchasing these types of Samsung phones that have been outdated for so many years. So I just probably, again, would recommend avoiding buying this phone from that perspective too, just because you are going to be running into some problems when it comes down to that software perspective and that performance perspective as well. So that leads us into which phones should you even buy? Well, there are still lots of devices that are still available that I would still recommend purchasing. Really, any device beyond than just the Samsung Galaxy A21 is better. Things like the Samsung Galaxy S21, that is a very good phone I'd still recommend buying. That has gone down in value quite a bit. You have devices like the Google Pixel 6a, the standard Pixel 6, you have the Pixel 7, you have the Galaxy S22, you have the Galaxy S21 FE. There's still lots of options out there, but for this type of budget, it's just going to be hard to find a phone for this price. But I will tell you, I would probably recommend avoiding buying this phone just because there's just so many issues going on with it, and it's just a fairly outdated phone when it kind of comes down to it. So from that perspective, that kind of covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.